Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we're just going to kind of continue with the first New Deal and talk a little bit about like what are some of the programs, the purposes of the programs, some of the goals of the programs that are created during FDR's first New Deal. So remember, try and categorize them. Where do you think they fall? Is this a relief program? Is this a recovery program? Or is this a reform program? And be able to kind of explain the difference between the different types of programs that are created. So it can get a little bit confusing because they are like it suggests from alphabet soup, they're all kind of named with these like abbreviated initials, 3 or 4 initials. So like for example, the first one, the CCC, which stands for the Civilian Conservation Corps. So what this organization did is it provided employment for people who are unemployed, and the CCC would do conservation efforts out in different parts of the United States. They also did a lot of construction, so they will build different kind of projects, different roadways, big public works projects. And a lot of FDR's programs are these big public works projects that are being done. And so this was kind of across the country. And so one of the first big kind of public works projects to kind of be implemented, or organizations to be implemented during the Roosevelt administration. Second one is called the AAA, or the Agricultural Adjustment Act. So this act, or this New Deal program, this was designed specifically to provide relief to farmers during the Great Depression. And so the AAA essentially did a couple of different things. So number one, they're going to try and convince farmers to not produce as much food. So remember, for a long time, going all the way back to the Populist Party, overproduction was a major problem for farmers. So essentially, the AAA is going to pay farmers to not grow food, and so like to try and limit overproduction of the of farm products. And so like essentially they're trying to limit the amount of production out there in order to drive the prices up for farmers. And so it's kind of a weird situation, right? During the Depression, there's overproduction of food, but there's actually people starving. There's, because they can't afford to buy it. And also it's not making a profit for the farmers. So it's kind of like a weird situation that's happening during this whole time period. Now, the AAA is an interesting one because it is going to be challenged in the court system. Eventually, it's found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So you want to kind of keep that in mind as far as some of these programs, because they're passed so quickly. They don't necessarily, they're not necessarily always following the Constitution, and some of these programs are going to be deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court and by the other branches of the federal government. But remember, so the AAA is designed to provide relief to farmers specifically and to help kind of farming and agriculture to recover during the Great Depression. Another famous one during the first New Deal is going to be the PWA, which is called the Public Works Administration. So again, this is going to provide direct jobs to Americans and help with unemployment. And so the PWA, essentially, they're going to build great public works across the United States. So they're building things like bridges and dams and roadways and different things throughout the country. And so it's providing direct employment to Americans, and they're getting paid by the federal government. Just like, when we talked about the CCC, they're getting paid directly by the federal government. Same thing here. So this is, again, think about changes to the way America functions. America, this is a private sector thing. This was not something that the federal government would employ people in construction, employ people to do great public works. Now, you have to think about what Roosevelt is thinking in these projects. Number one, he's trying to help the American people to have a job, to be able to provide for their family. So it's a form of direct relief to the people, but it's not necessarily like in the form of direct assistance, not necessarily sending payments out, which they did do. They did provide like welfare payments and direct assistance to people, but it's also doing something for the country, right? It's rebuilding the infrastructure, it's rebuilding the roads, it's rebuilding bridges, and sometimes for the first time building things for the first time. And so like this is kind of a new approach towards the role of government in America. And so what you want to think about is like, is this going too far for the role of government? Is the government playing like too big of a role as far as an employer of the American people, or is this acceptable given the crisis situation? Different Americans are going to weigh in differently on the context of this. All right, the last one we're just going to take a look at is the FDIC. the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, excuse me. So essentially, when you take a look at this, so like this is showing you modern America, which is you are insured up to $250,000 in modern America. Okay. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, you were insured as a depositor at a bank up to $2,500. So what exactly does this mean? What did the FDIC do? So remember when people put money in the bank in the the 1920s and the early Depression? And essentially we talked about the bank runs that happened. People went to go take their money out of the bank. And if you didn't get there quick enough, right, the bank could close and collapse, and your money, you might not ever get your money back. So essentially what this did is it provided insurance for depositors. So if I put money into the bank, I was guaranteed, at this time I was guaranteed up to $2,500 of deposit. So meaning if I had anything up to $2,500 in the bank, even if I went to the bank and the bank had, closed and the bank had crashed, and I couldn't get my money out, the federal government would send me money up to $2,500. Modern day America, it's up to $250,000. So if let's say a bank collapses and you have your money in that bank, you are still going to get your deposit back. Just the federal government's going to insure you and send you the money instead of you getting it from the bank. So this kind of like is meant to fix a problem from the Depression, but also meant to ease people's minds in putting their money back in the bank. So we talked about in the last screencast the bank holidays. This is another measure to kind of like make people feel more comfortable putting their money back into the banking system to get money circulating back into the U.S. economy again. Okay, so this is gonna be we're gonna kind of cut it there. This is a short screencast, just kind of in addition to the first New Deal screencast. So again, things to keep in mind, right? What are these programs? Are they relief programs? Are they recovery programs? Are they reform programs? Some of them can be multiple things at the same time. You want to be clear on that. They can be multiple things. And then how does FDR's approach to the Depression compare to Hoover's approach to the Depression? How do you see them? How do you see them as similar? How do you see them as very different? Be able to do some comparison between the New Deal, first New Deal, and Hoover's response to the Depression.